Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast, Finding Your Flow. I'm so excited to have you here. So, I want to welcome you to our new season of this transformational podcast, and it's called My Intuition Made Me Do It. I'm your host, Jennifer Jane Young, and I'm here to ignite inspiration within you. I'm the author of Say Yes to Your Yes, How to Trust Your Gut and Take the Leap, and the visionary behind the School of Intuitive Leadership. I've dedicated my life to empowering individuals to trust their intuition and lead their lives from that powerful inner wisdom. Through my work as an international speaker and intuitive leadership advisor, I've witnessed the transformative power of following one's intuition firsthand with entrepreneurs and organizations around the world. This season, we're diving deep into the stories of people who dare to listen to their inner voice and take the leap. Join us as we unravel the mysteries of intuition, sharing captivating experiences that will reignite your belief in the incredible guidance within you. Get ready to embark on a journey of self-discovery and empowerment. It's time to embrace the clarity and courage that comes from trusting your intuition. So sit back, relax, and prepare to be inspired into action. Your dreams are waiting. Let's make them a reality together. Awesome. Well, it's so nice to be back in a Zoom space together. First of all, Danielle Mendoza, the woman who saved my life while I was publishing my book. Um, I'm so excited to have you here to hear about your story. I think, as entrepreneurs, it becomes like such an important thing to learn to navigate business through our intuition. And I think you're really, really great at that. So I'm going to kick us off with the first question, essentially, which is, what did your intuition make you do that you would like to share today?
So my intuition told me in early 2021 that I should write a book, solo author, like big boy process, write a book, publish it. And I had almost no followers. I think I collectively across platforms, including my email list, had like 200 followers.
Oh,
So typically people look at writing a book later on when they have more of an audience. They have more people who can, go read that book and help it get to bestseller and all the good things that come when you publish a book. But I just knew it was time. Logically, it didn't make sense. And I think this is where we tend to argue with our intuition a lot, as we let our mind kind of override our heart,
mhm.
and we look at all the facts of the situation and we say, well, I could have easily said, I don't have any followers yet, let me be in business a couple years, let me get my business rolling, then I can write this book. But honestly, my heart was screaming out for it. And part of that was because I was seeing so much about manifestation in the business world in 2021. It was really a big buzzword back then. And I saw a lot of people kind of, doing it wrong. And I hate to even qualify something as right or wrong when it comes to spiritual practices like manifestation, but I saw some really important elements missing from most people's experience when they were being taught how to manifest something.
Right.
And at the time, I had, gosh, over a decade of experience in energy work and manifestation, and really had nailed down this process,
Mhm.
essentially, or at least a processed way to communicate it.
Right.
Because manifestation is not a linear thing, but when we communicate with other humans, we have to often lay things out in a linear way in order to be clear and understood. And so I have a gift for that. People often say, like, wow, you're such a natural teacher. And I wanted to leverage that and bring that gift forward and share about manifestation, what I knew and understood about it, and share about my own story of being inspired to start a business and what that looked like, and share some basic business principles with women who are brand new to developing their business, because when we understand certain principles, we become better decision makers. And
Mhm.
I found that a lot of the confidence that was lacking in the business world with women who were new to all of that came because they were searching for exactly the right answer outside of themselves. And they weren't trusting their own intuition and their own ability to kind of qualify their intuition through these principles rather than hard and fast logic rules. So I took my own advice, essentially, what I wanted other women to do, and said, okay, here we go. Screw it. We're writing a book. We're going to do it. I don't know how big it's going to be. I don't know how many people it will reach, but I knew it would be important to at least the people I was already reaching. And so that was enough to say yes and go for it.
I love it. So I just want to say, I think it's fair, like what you're saying about, the manifestation piece being taught wrong or being done wrong, because it is something that I do think is taught in a sort of a misconstrued way that actually ends up making people feel more broken than anything else because they're like, oh, I'm not getting this thing. I can't manifest. So I love that you wrote that book, first of all. I think it's so important for those kinds of teachings around manifestation to be out in the world. And the other thing I want to highlight is that you bypass this thought that your left brain told you that you had to have all the pieces in place before you could trust your intuition. And a lot of people get stuck there, right? And this is where we get stuck in analysis paralysis because we're like, oh, I don't have enough followers. Oh, I don't have enough experience. Oh, I don't have. Instead of just trusting, like, well, if this intuitive nudge is coming to me now, it's because I have everything inside of me to actually do the thing. So I love that you were brave enough to just say yes to your yes and do that thing. And like, oh my God, okay, I'm not gonna put all of this out yet because I want to go through like the different layers of questions. But I'm just getting a thought of like, oh my God, we wouldn't probably not have Danielle doing the work she's doing today if she had not trusted her gut and started like wrote that book. But we'll get into that in a second. So what would you say in saying yes to that particular yes was the most important lesson for you in trusting your gut?
Allowing myself to stretch. So, like you said, a lot of the pieces didn't line up. And, I also didn't have the money to do a book, and yet somehow managed to invest multiple five figures in that book, right? So it's one of those things that it stretched me in a really big way. And it showed me that when we're elevating, when we're moving from level to level, and I kind of already knew this from the growth I had gone through in my spiritual work prior, but to walk it out is always, a new lesson coming out of that. And this time I was really able to see, okay, when I am stretching myself mentally, vulnerably in terms of my visibility as well as financially, there is a lot of room for growth. So I kind of think of it as like we're in this little energetic bubble. And
Mm,
when we stretch, that bubble blows up and gets bigger. And we get really uncomfortable because we don't know how to fill all of that space with our beingness.
mm.
And then I had the opportunity to, stretch the edges of my bubble just bigger and bigger and bigger and keep leaning into it. And of course, I had my moments of freaking out and being like, what am I doing? Is this even worth it? I just spent all this money. Like, should I be going forward with this? I remember I was writing the book and I called my husband up and I was like, the book, it just starts. Like it just starts. There's just like all of a sudden I'm in this story and he's like, yeah, that's what books do. And he's an avid reader like myself. And I was like, okay, okay. So like I had to be talked off the ledge a couple of times. Like just silly stuff comes up when we're in like fear and panic mode. So just making room for that and knowing like I don't need to shrink down my bubble. I don't need to step back from this. I just need to lean into that discomfort and rest on the resources around me. Calling up my husband that day, I could have spiraled deep and like not talked to anybody about it. But
Yeah.
instead, I called him up, had my little panic moment. He reassured me, and I was like, okay, cool, moving on. So that was an opportunity for growth in a really big way. Just being so vulnerable in myself, but also publicly at the same time sharing my stories.
Yeah. There's so much internal talk that happens when we stretch ourselves, right? Because it's like, how dare I stretch myself this big? Like, why would I take up this much space in the world? And we have to be really careful about the spiraling downwards. And there's actually one of my favorite manifestation teachers. I don't know if you know her, Reagan Hillier. She teaches manifestation in such a beautiful way as well, like really from the inside out. And it's actually I started to open myself up to the idea of manifestation um, when I heard her speak about it, which is why I feel like your book is so, so important because when you really understand where manifestation comes from, it's a whole other story. And she talks about like spiraling up instead of spiraling down. And you,
Yes.
as soon as we hit our upper limit, our ego, our left brain, our like any trauma from our nervous system is going to try to pull us to spiral downwards. And it happened to me this week, actually. I pitched myself to speak at a really big space. I'm not going to say the name of it. I told you before, because I don't want to jinx anything. But I applied to speak at this like really renowned place. And as soon as I hit the send button, oh my God, I started spiraling downwards. Like, what the hell did I just do? How dare I? Like, as if I'm ever going to teach in this space. Like, it was crazy. And I caught myself as soon as it started. And I was actually going out to walk the dogs. And I was like, okay, I need to let nature absorb this because this is not, I don't want to spiral downwards there. Um, so it's important for people to know this part of the intuitive process when we start to like trust our gut, because it's not like, rainbows and unicorns when we say yes to our yes. It's like this internal kind of little battle that happens. And like you said, like having people, talk you off the ledge, and you're gonna go into this um there's a little moment where you go into the dark night of the soul kind of thing where you come face to
Yes.
face with your big insecurities, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you're right. It's not unicorns and rainbows and butterflies. It's more like mosquitoes and a beautiful lake. You're enjoying this beautiful view and you're getting eaten alive at the same time. Like that is really what it's like. And it's something that we have to settle into, right? We wouldn't get to enjoy that beautiful lake if we weren't willing to put ourselves kind of in the path of those mosquitoes. And so we just have to reconcile that reality and know that it's not all good and positive and feeling, but it is light. So there's
Yeah.
like a lightness when I allow myself to expand in that way versus a heaviness when I am spiraling. And I've learned to really get familiar with that in my own body. For me, it's particularly in my chest, on my shoulders, and in my back. And when I'm allowing myself to step into an expansive place, even when it's anxiety ridden and really scary, there's this outward expansion feeling and I feel so much lighter, and I know that that's a signal for me that I should move in that direction. So
Yep.
that's something I had to learn as I moved through it as well. And I started to recognize that in the past, like as I looked back on my life, times when I made certain decisions that kind of made no sense.
Right.
Even marrying my husband, like our first date, I was like, oh, I don't know, should I go out with this guy? Like, we worked together at the time. I'm like, I'm not sure this is, I always said I would never date anyone I work with. And I actually made him get a new job when we started dating. But it was one of those things that looking back, I can feel that expansive feeling in my body. I was experiencing that at the time. And for
Mm.
a long time, I considered that feeling unanchored and aloof, and I didn't trust it. And I thought that it meant that I was just kind of like going completely untethered. And I've learned now how much surrendering into that other untethered state can actually be moving in the right direction. And so I'm learning to still to this day, learning to roll with that, and continue to expand my bubble as I go. And the other thing I really learned, writing a book in particular taught me this. We can't always put what we want to do into a box of rules or the right way.
Mm.
So everyone thinks about writing a book and they think, okay, I'm going to schedule time, I'm going to sit down at my computer and I'm going to write. And most of my book actually wasn't written that way. I would say I did my editing that way, but a lot of my book was written in the moment of inspired thought. And that was happening all over the place. Like I would be in the shower, sitting in the bathtub, driving in my car, out shopping, like just out on the ranch with my cats. And all of a sudden I'd be like, oh my gosh, it was like this divine download where God was just giving me, the Holy Spirit was coming through me with like what to say. And I knew that if I didn't capture it, I wouldn't be able to get it back later.
Mm,
And so I just would like pull out my phone and my notes app and do voice to text and at least capture the meat of the thought. And then I knew I could pretty it up later when I was sitting and editing. And so I learned that things don't happen in this structured, kind of planned out way, especially when it's something our intuition is heavily involved in, like a creative endeavor. And
yeah.
I've learned to trust that a lot more as well and make space in my life for pausing as I'm doing these other activities to be
Yeah.
able to capture some of that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I got so many spinal chills with all of those last things that you just said. Like all of that rigidity and structure and like over trying to plan and control things really kills the potential of our creativity. It reminds me, actually, there's two things that remind me of Liz Gilbert, actually, as you were talking about that. One is she talks about, when did she talk about this? I think it was in her book Big Magic, where I can't remember which author who used to write poems or something. She'd be like working in the fields, and then all of a sudden, like this creative idea would go by, and it was as if like this fleeing thing, she'd have to like chase it and like run into the house to grab her pencil in time to like write it down and capture it. So I really love the idea of like, having different ways in which you can kind of capture your creative ideas while you're on the go so that you don't lose them and so that you can be in that inspired moment. And the other vision that came to me when you're talking about the mosquitoes, so there's two things. You were talking about the lightness that comes with intuition. I totally agree. And the discomfort we were talking about is just a temporary one, right? So I don't know if you remember in Eat, Pray, Love, when she like actually I think it's in the book, it doesn't go through in the movie, where she actually sits down and meditates outside and lets the mosquitoes bite her, and she actually has to stay calm and non-reactive while she's getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. And that's the vision that came to me when you were talking about like it's kind of like sitting at a lake with mosquitoes, because the moving through that process when you listen to your intuition is a temporary discomfort, right? It does feel like, oh my God, I'm going to die, but it is way less heavy than the constant discomfort day to day of not listening to your intuition and like shrinking yourself. Like you say, that discomfort is suffocating and it's long term.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, just so many good things that you shared there. And I'm curious, Danielle, like when you started to get this nudge that you had to write a book, what did it feel like? Like, what did it feel like in your body? How did it feel, those nudges from your intuition? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
So on the surface level, it was a really nagging feeling. And when I say surface level, like surface level of my soul. So it's still pretty much in the depths.
Right.
But at that soul surface level, it was really nagging because it is something that I have wanted for a long, long time. I've always identified with being a writer. And you don't have to be a writer to write a book. Let me just say that. That's like who I work with now is, specifically non-writers. But for myself, probably shouldn't be a big surprise that now I work in books. I've always felt like a writer and I wanted to write a book for a really long time. In fact, probably 5 or 6 years before I ever wrote my book, I sat down and did a exercise at, it was New Year's Eve, and my husband and I were like, okay, we want to like set these goals, like 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year. And we heard that I think it was a Harvard study that said if you write it down, it's like 80% more likely to happen than if you don't write it down. So we
Mm,
just made these lists of like things we would like to do. And on that list for me, one of those things was to write a book and to have a bestseller. And at the time, I was like, okay, I'll probably write my first book like 10 years from now. And then, gosh, a bestseller, I don't know, like that's really huge. I'll probably have to write, it'll probably be like my third book or my fifth book that like actually goes bestseller. And I was just qualifying all of that with my mind as I was letting my intuition pour on the page. And I was okay with that because it was a safe space of like, let's just put these things out there. And then, of course, like most manifestation works, it all happened a lot sooner than I ever thought it would.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was one of those things that was really nagging at first. Like it had that like shoulders dropped, just like kind of nagging feeling like your mom is asking you for the 50th time to clean your room and you're like, okay, but you know you have to do it, right? So there was a little bit of a heaviness in it in that way, I think, because I had ignored it for so long.
Right.
But at the same time, it felt really exciting, like a lot of energy right in my solar plexus, which is like a center for creativity too. So I'm not surprised, but like fireflies darting around, like that energy just moving and things getting, kind of exciting. And some people kind of describe it as butterflies, but I feel like butterflies are so gentle. Like I don't get butterflies in my stomach. I get like angry bees. It's like going crazy. So it was really this movement inspiring feeling that made me want to start to take action. And actually, I said yes to it in April of
Yeah.
21. And I was busy with some other things. I was working with another brand, and I didn't start writing my book till June. But in April, I set a publishing date of September. And so June came and I was like, oh crap, like I need to start writing this book. Like I'm really behind.
Oh, shit.
And by some magic of the universe, I was ready to go and published in September, which like talk about a crash course in learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually I don't recommend doing it that quick. Like don't put yourself under that stress. It's not worth it. But for me, it was more important to get it out and done than
Yeah.
it was to maybe get it right. And a lot about it went really right. So it was a great experience, all said and done. But I wanted to be like, I did this thing. And
Mhm.
so I was really focused on it. And at that point, I kind of went head down for the next 3 months, got it written in 2 months, and really just expanded from there in the process. And I had to give everything to it, all of my attention at that time. And so now I've learned how to help my clients not have to like take a sabbatical basically to write their book. Yeah, like how to kind of weave it into the process of life and business, because we
Yeah.
we aren't always gifted with the opportunity to put our head down for 2 months. I just so happened I left the brand I was working with at the top of June. My husband had been working from home as well, so he was helping to homeschool our kids. And we were still kind of in the thick of COVID shutdowns in LA. So there wasn't a lot of outside life going on that I had to tend to very closely.
Right.
And I mean, when I say head down, I was like not plugged into reality. A massive wildfire happened, like
Wow.
literally, just a couple acres from my ranch. And I had no idea. Like I went out one time after writing towards the end of the book, I like just finished. I went outside and I was like, oh, it's really smoky. And my husband's like, yeah, there's a fire like right there. I've been making sure we have all our stuff put together in case we need to evacuate. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this was going on. Like
Oh,
that's how out of it I was. But it got done. It
yeah.
worked and everything was good and safe, and we never had to evacuate. But it's a good lesson too, in just taking things as they come. There would have been no point in me worrying about evacuation and not focusing on my book, until the time came that we did have to evacuate. And luckily, I was able to lean on my resources, and my husband was there and kind of aware and ready when we would need to be. But that was a big lesson in like, oh, wow, I really did just unplug from everything.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Let's hit pause for just a second. I want to check in with you and see how you are feeling as you listen to this incredible story today. If you are feeling like you want to activate your yes and say yes to your yes, I invite you to take my Say Yes to Your Yes digital experience, which is a 12-week journey to intuitive mastery. This incredible transformational experience includes a digital copy of my book, Say Yes to Your Yes, and it will for sure activate your yes and inspire you into action so that you can live the life of your dreams. Head over to jenniferjaneyoung.com/course to start your journey today. All right, let's go back to today's incredible story. Like I worked with you when I launched my book, and you are so calm. Like I was so frantic, like messaging you every day with like a new panic and a next panic and a new panic. And you were just like, it's all good. Just do this. Just do like, so you were talking about at the beginning, like how you're like really great at teaching and giving people a linear path, even when it's not a linear journey, like a step by step. And I just want to like confirm that you are so great at that. And you're so calm in your leadership with people. So, because it is like all of this comes with fears and discomfort, like we were saying, and all of that stuff. Um, so I'm going to go to like the juiciest question usually of the interview, which we touched on a little bit at the beginning. It's always a scary one for me to think back on because I'm like, oh my God, it scares me to think of what would have been if I had not. So, what do you think your life would look like today, or who would be Danielle if you had not written that first book and just trusted your gut?
Gosh, I can't even imagine, because now founding the book consultancy 2 years ago, moving through the growth that we've gone through this year, and looking forward to ultimately franchising my consultancy so other
Oh,
people can, make a living serving people in this way. Um, it's all such a full circle moment for me. So for this long history of feeling like a writer, wanting to write, then studying business strategy and marketing, and then becoming a ghostwriter, literally because it was the easiest thing to do in 2013. I had small kids. I was at home and I was like, I need to do something that's going to make me some money. What is on the internet? And I wanted it to be trustworthy.
right.
And I found a site that would act as like a third party broker for ghostwriters to work with blogs and online articles and websites. And so I jumped into that because I was like, okay, now I've got the business strategy and the marketing understanding, and I know how to write, and it's pretty natural to me. So I was doing that. Then kind of by accident ended up in a marketing agency out of that, and then from there had my whole life kind of burned to the ground, energetically and emotionally. Talk about a dark night of the soul. I mean, I think that lasted years for me, and found life coaching, worked through so much of my own disruptive patterns and self sabotage and all these different things. Found a new profound joy that allowed space for all of the emotions, right? I don't like to say I found happiness because it's not all happy. There's
Right.
a lot of grief in life, there's a lot of struggle and frustration, but I was able to find a joy that had a strong foundation, through all of the work that I did, as well as through Christ and the church, and leaned into all of that, and then decided, okay, I want to start a like real deal business, like, not that I wasn't in business when I was a ghostwriter. Obviously I was in business for myself, but I didn't see it that way. I didn't feel
Mhm.
like that. I just felt like, oh, these people are hiring me and I'm doing this thing and, whatever. So I started my consultancy, and that's when it was time to write my book. And I used the book to launch the consultancy, and was working with women new to business. Love that. I still do that work, and others in my network, because I'm like, okay, now I'm publishing a book, and I need people who are going to like share it and buy it and like help me do the thing. So I started networking like crazy and getting involved in more online networking. And from there I had more successful people who maybe weren't a good fit for my consultancy come to me and say, I know this isn't what you do, but I know you wrote a book, can you help me write this thing? And I started helping with that. And after like the fourth person, I was like, okay, this can be a thing that I do. Clearly, the universe is calling me to something bigger. And I need to lean into that. And I started the consultancy, developed my process after going through a couple of books of my own. And now we're here. And it's just continued to, like you said, spiral up, and I feel like if you think of that spiraling up as like a spiral staircase, it's like you hit the ceiling and you're like kind of pressed up against the ceiling and you're like, what am I doing? Like the ceiling is here. But then you break through to that next level, and all of a sudden, what was this opaque ceiling that you couldn't see through or move through, you can look down and it's a crystal clear floor and you can see exactly where you've come from. And so it's this difficult process of sort of moving through the fog, and trusting that you're going to get to the destination you set out for. And I don't think I would know that if I hadn't leaned into my intuition every step of the way with, deciding to go back to school when my kids were young, deciding to do the ghostwriting, deciding to move in with the marketing agency, deciding to, get some help and help myself and heal. And just knowing that that was a priority in that season, and then deciding to say, okay, I am healed enough to do more, and I'm called to more in this life, and lean into that instead of saying, who am I? What kind of legacy can I really leave? I mean, whose life can I even touch? But just trusting that if I was open to it and willing to serve, that that would all come to fruition in a way that I could never plan for.
Mm.
And just, I mean, the trust is huge. That self trust piece and being able to shut out the noise of the world as well as your own mind, which is so influenced by the world, and
Right.
being able to hear the spirit inside of you speak and say, okay, here we go. Like, that's who I need to befriend. That's who I need to obey and listen to, and being willing to do so.
Yeah. There's a whole kind of theme to the story that you're sharing today that I want to just highlight because, you were talking about how you initially got this nudge to write a book and, none of the pieces were really in place. And so, like, that imposter syndrome happens, right? So, when any kind of intuitive nudge that we're getting, it often comes with, like, well, we don't feel like enough yet to move forward with it. But if you look at where you landed now, I really believe that when we come down onto this earth, like, into physical human form, we really come into the world with a purpose. And the reason why we get intuitive nudges is because that purpose is already laid out and waiting for us. So even if we don't actually feel, our brain doesn't actually feel like we're ready for it, our soul is ready for it. Like, it is our planned path, right? And we're never going to know, like, what is all ahead of us. We're never going to have those guarantees. It's only when we start taking steps forward that we're like, oh, well, this is flowing naturally. And, like, all of the pieces just come together. And now, like, look at where you
Yeah,
are in your life and in your work. It's like, oh, yeah, okay. Well, no, now it makes sense that my intuition told me to write a book all these years ago. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think it's really important for people to know that you're not going to necessarily understand the why initially when you get that intuitive nudge, right? It's going to become clear as you start following the breadcrumbs. That's when you start to get some confirmations of why you were pushed to do that thing in the first place.
absolutely. And, in Christianity, we say, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called.
Mm,
And, whatever higher power you connect to, universe, spirit, God, I believe it is all of the same thing.
yeah,
And it is just true that we are not called to a purpose based on our current skill level. We're called to a purpose based on a higher divine, path, like you said, and our skill level adapts as we go. And the same is true of writing a book. I see this in my clients. They come to me and they're like, well, I'm not an author. And I'm like, yeah, because you've never written a book before. Like, why would you expect yourself to be something that you've never done before? That's just silly. So, like, waiting till you feel like a writer or you feel like an author to write a book is kind of an oxymoron. You
right.
become an author, you become a writer through the process of
Mm,
writing this book. And then when it's all said and done and it's published, you can say, wow, I'm an author. Like, you can own and integrate that identity as part of you because you have done the thing.
yeah.
And I think a lot of us are so gifted at, our unique zone of genius that we think it's obvious. We think everyone else knows how to do that, and that's not true. And also, we think that everything else in life should feel like that, and that's not necessarily true either. We need to be willing to put ourselves in situations where we are uncomfortable and we're learning and gaining new skills and growing. The first thing I ever crocheted was horrible. Like it just was. But I didn't stop crocheting because I'm like, oh, this isn't a zone of genius. I enjoy it. It's meditative, it's fun. It's
Yeah.
really cool to see this like long piece of string become something that I can use, like a blanket or a pillow. And so I kept doing it, and I learned about tension, and I learned about counting, my stitches and counting rows, and how patterns work and how to read them, and then how to even create some of my own if I had a visual idea in my head. And so you become more adept at things as you learn more about doing them. And we have to be okay with that, because maybe I am called to crochet. I don't know where that will take me someday.
Mm.
But we have donated blankets, so like maybe that's part of it. And that blanket got to touch someone out there. I mean, the ripple effect of these things we do are often unseen, but we have to just trust that there is a purpose to it, and that it's okay to not be good at it when we first start.
I love that, Danielle, so much. So as we're kind of in this theme of just like getting started, w- what would you, what would be one piece of wisdom you would share with someone who's listening to this story today and is feeling like this call inside and they're kind of feeling stuck or wanting to move forward but unsure of how to move forward? What would be one drop of Danielle wisdom that you would share?
So if it truly is about the how, and it's not fear that's holding you back, that would be the first step, I guess, would be to get clear. Is it fear that you're like, well, I just don't know if this is going to work? Or
Mm,
do you really not know the next baby step to take? And if it really is that you don't know the next baby step to take, look for a resource. It's that whole like find the who, not the how. Who
mm,
can help you? Who has maybe walked this path, right? Like you set out on your book journey, first book, super exciting, super scary, not sure what to do. And you reached out to me and you're like, okay, here's someone I can identify who's gone further down this path. And by
yeah.
the way, when Jennifer first reached out to me, it's not like we really knew each other. We were in a similar, we were in a networking space together. And I was talking about what I do, and she was talking about what she does. And then she mentioned she was writing a book, and we had a coffee chat, and we started talking about it. And then the rest developed from there. And sometimes that's how it works, is just saying, okay, who in my world actually has done this, or at least done the first step,
Hmm.
and asking them, what was that like? How did that work? Most people are so willing to give in a mentorship sense. It doesn't mean you have to go hire someone. A lot of people who found success in things love the idea of giving back to others who are new to it. And
Yeah.
so just trust that the universe has already put that person in your path. You just need to kind of turn on your reticular activating system and be able to identify them and take that first baby step, as scary as it might be.
Yeah, you're so right. People are really, really willing to support. And you were like such a beautiful example with like, you have such a big heart and you're so generous and present, really. And it was really such a beautiful example. And, that's really the goal also of this whole series is for people to be able to, even if it's just through listening to a story, get that mentorship, get that little spark ignited and find their way forward or be able to reach out to one of the people that I interviewed or whatever that is. So I love that that is your piece of wisdom. I think that's super valuable. um and, obviously, I really believe that the right people, the right videos, the right books, the right resources fall in front of us at the right time. And that has been my whole path, mentors, books, whatever that is. And so my intention is for these stories to fall in front of the eyes of the person who really needs it. And so I know that your story will fall in front of the right people. So someone hears your story and is just really inspired by what you do, um, and wants to reach out, like to work with you, get your support, whatever it is. I don't know what is going to be ignited for them. What is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there, or just email me hello@confidentconcept.com, both singular. That's a great way to get in touch as well. And, I'm in my email every single day. I'm on LinkedIn pretty much every day. Not on the weekends. That's like me time, right? That's a little different, but I'm happy to get in touch and figure out, what is the best resource for someone to take their next step. Even if that resource isn't me, I have an extensive network of people who are happy to help as well, who might be a better fit than myself. And I'm open to understanding that and being okay with that and making sure that every person is connected where they are meant to be connected. And just kind of giving in that way is one of the things that means a lot to me in this space of business and writing.
Yeah. So we're gonna put all the links in the show notes for people if they want to just go back and capture that. Danielle, I mean, it's always so nice to hang out. I love you so much. You're like such a dear friend now and such an important person in my life. You have really like helped me move past that ceiling that I was at really in that staircase. And I'm so grateful to you. And I just can't wait to get this story out into the world. So thank you so much for being here with me.
Oh, thank you. It means so much to me to hear that and to hear that you're growing and expanding too. I just love it.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's just take a moment to take in that story. My wish is that it inspires you into the aligned action that you are really ready for. You also don't have to do this alone. Just like my guests have shared about all the incredible people that have supported them along their journey, we are here for you too. If you're ready to uplevel your personal leadership, take big leaps in your life, or take that next leap on your entrepreneurial journey, join us at the School of Intuitive Leadership so that you can experience more ease, flow, joy, abundance, and live in your full brilliance and wake up each day to the life that you really want. Find out more at jenniferjaneyoung.com or at theschoolofintuitiveleadership.com. And participate in this movement with us by sharing an episode that deeply inspired you and leaving us a review. I can't wait to see you on the next episode.